All right, we're ready for a deep dive today. You know those stacks of stuff you sent us on brain health, dementia statistics, Dr. Daniel Amen's brain SPECT imaging? We're going to unpack it all. And you know what really struck me? It seems like you're ready to take charge of your brain health, especially, with some of those past choices weighing on your mind.
Yeah, and what's really cool about all this is we're learning that our brains are way more adaptable than we ever thought. So even if you haven't always made the, healthiest choices, who has really?
Yeah.
The point is there's a ton you can do right now to get on the right track.
I like the sound of that, especially when I look at these stats you sent. Like, whoa, 1 in 2 people over 85 will develop dementia.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And Dr. Amen's work really drives home that this isn't just some inevitable decline. He wants us to move past that fear and embrace what he calls brain envy. Like we should be envious of those with healthy brains
Yeah.
and use that as motivation.
Okay, I'm down with brain envy. But how do we get there? You mentioned Dr. Amen's Bright Minds acronym before.
Oh, yeah. That's his clever way of helping us remember the 11 major risk factors for brain drain: blood flow, retirement and aging, inflammation, genetics, head trauma, toxins, mental health, immunity and infections, neurohormone imbalances, diabetes, and sleep. It's a mouthful.
It is, and some of those are pretty surprising. Diabetes,
Yeah.
and then there was something about gum disease impacting brain health.
Right. So diabetes is a term Dr. Amen uses because diabetes and obesity often go together, and both have a huge impact on your brain over time. And as for gum disease, it actually increases inflammation throughout your body. And yeah, that includes your brain.
Wow, inflammation is a bigger deal than I thought.
Oh, absolutely. It's like this constant low-level stress just humming away in your brain,
Yeah.
messing with your brain's ability to function, and contributing to a bunch of problems as we age, including, cognitive decline.
Yikes. So how do we combat that inflammation? You mentioned exercise earlier.
Exactly. It's like a turbocharge for your brain. It
Yeah.
increases blood flow, which delivers vital oxygen and nutrients to your brain cells. And what's even cooler is exercise actually helps your brain grow new brain cells,
Hmm.
especially in the hippocampus.
Hippocampus, that's the memory center, right?
That's the one. And it's one of the most vulnerable areas when it comes to aging. So that feeling you get when you remember where you parked after a long walk, that's your hippocampus getting a workout.
I like it. That actually makes me feel a little better about some of my past choices. Like, those weren't always the healthiest. You mentioned earlier about the brain's ability to change. Neuroplasticity, is that what it's called?
Yeah, neuroplasticity is like your brain's superpower. It means your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on your experiences and habits. And the best part is it happens throughout your entire life.
So what you're saying is even if we haven't always, treated our brains the best, it's not too late to make a change.
You got it. It is never too late. You're not stuck with the brain you have today. It's always adapting and evolving.
That is encouraging. It reminds me of that story about Troy Glass, the baseball player.
Oh, yeah.
He totally transformed his brain in just 2 months after joining Dr. Amen's program. Talk about a home run for brain health.
It really shows you what's possible and how even small changes in your daily habits, like what you eat, how you move, how you sleep, how you handle stress, can make a huge difference.
Now, you mentioned earlier feeling a bit skeptical about the ADHD info.
And I get it. ADHD is often misunderstood.
For sure. But thinking back to those times I really struggled to focus makes me wonder.
You know what's interesting is that Dr. Amen's research goes beyond that whole hyperactive kid stereotype. He's found 7 different types of ADHD, and they show up in different ways. Like some people with ADHD are actually super focused on stuff they enjoy, which can kind of mask the struggles they have with tasks they find boring.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Now that you mention it, I can relate to that hyperfocus thing. I used to put all my energy into those crazy workout routines. Maybe it wasn't just a preference, maybe it was my way of regulating things and I didn't even know it.
Could be. And you know those misinterpretations you talked about? That's why getting a professional assessment is so important. It's not about labels. It's about understanding your own brain and finding what works for you.
Basically getting to know your brain better, which is good for all of us, really. And speaking of understanding our brains, you're a parent too, right? I was really struck by the statistics you shared on youth mental health. Seems like kids today are dealing with so much pressure.
Yeah, it's definitely a concern. The stats are pretty alarming. But here's the thing. One of the most powerful things we can do as parents is to prioritize our own mental health first.
Right, like that whole put on your own oxygen mask first thing.
Exactly. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
Dr. Amen actually worked with Dr. Charles Fay on this, and they really stress that modeling self-care is key. But it's also about how we parent.
You talked about not rescuing our kids from their problems. That one hit home for me.
I know it's so tempting to swoop in and fix everything, but we've got to empower our kids to find their own solutions. Like, say your kid forgets their homework.
Oh, I'd totally be tempted to run it over to them.
Right. But what if instead we respond with empathy, but also firmness? Like, oh no, that's so frustrating. What are your options? It might mean a consequence now, but it teaches them how to solve problems for the future.
So it's about helping them be resourceful and resilient,
Yeah.
not shielding them from everything.
Exactly. And that actually connects to another thing you mentioned, quality time. With our busy lives, those moments of connection are more important than ever.
It really is. And like, you don't need to be spending hours and hours, you know?
Right.
You were saying something about 20 minutes of dedicated time?
Yeah, 20 minutes. Dr. Amen's big on that. Just 20 minutes of focused time with your kid every day, where you're doing something they choose with no distractions. He even said, like, don't ask questions, no commands during that time, just pure connection.
Wow. No questions, no commands. Just being present.
It's all about creating that space where your child feels seen and heard. He tells this story about his literary agent, Carl, who was struggling to connect with his daughter. So he told him about this special time idea. And within weeks, Carl was telling him his daughter wouldn't leave his side.
That's so sweet. It really shows you how much kids just want that connection.
100%. And, you know, that makes you think about the challenges of raising kids these days with all the smartphones and social media.
It's a whole other world. So any advice for navigating that minefield? How do we even compete with these devices?
Well, he talks about delay, supervise, and educate. So delay giving them smartphones as long as possible. And then when you do, make sure you have access and you're supervising what they're doing online.
That makes sense, especially with everything going on with, cyberbullying and age-inappropriate content.
Exactly. And especially with teenagers. It's so important to educate them on how these devices and apps are designed. Talk to them about dopamine and how they use things like intermittent reinforcement to keep them hooked.
Feels like we're battling against these algorithms for our kids' attention, you know? So on that note, any final tips on how we can all give our brains some love?
For sure. Dr. Amen is a big fan of BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits. He loves starting each day with a little positive affirmation, like just saying, today is going to be a great day.
I love that. So simple but powerful.
Right. It's all about setting the tone. He also says to ask yourself throughout the day, is this good for my brain or bad for my brain?
Okay, that's a good one. I can see how that would make you more aware of your choices.
Exactly. It works for everything,
Yeah.
from the food you eat to what you're doing to how you're spending your time. Oh, and speaking of food, Dr. Amen's got another good one for that. When it comes to what you're eating, he asks, do I love it? And does it love me back?
Okay, that is catchy. And practical, too. I'm going to have to start using that one.
Right. And I think that kind of sums up a major takeaway from our deep dive today. We have way more control over our brain health than we think.
Absolutely. It feels good to know we can make a real difference.
It really does. This has given us all a lot to think about. So I'm curious, what's one small step you'll take today to start optimizing your brain?
What a great question to end on. This has been an incredible deep dive into brain health. From learning about neuroplasticity to Dr. Amen's Bright Minds acronym, it's clear we've got so much we can do to support our brains and mental well-being at any age. Until next time, keep those brains sharp.